Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's lovely having you all on board. And I hope that you've all had a productive week so far. Tomorrow's Friday, so if you're a weekend lover, it is almost time to say welcome to the weekend. Hello, Sally and Karina. Good evening. Mariah, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me here this evening. It's so great. Hello, Adil. It's so great to see so many familiar names on board this evening. And I see one or two new names. So welcome to this evening's webinar. I hope that you will all enjoy it as much as I'm pretty sure I will. I really enjoyed putting it together, reliving a lot of the moments over the first couple of weeks of lockdown. That's where the inspiration of this webinar has come from. So I hope it is worth your while, and I hope you do feel inspired. I hope you learn something from it, and I hope that you enjoy this evening's webinar. Daruti and Mandeep, hello, and thank you so much for the kind words regarding the Iceland picture on the wall. A great friend of mine, Tessa Bardenhorst, who is involved in the interior design industry, had helped me make this a reality. It's up on the wall right behind me, and I love it. I think it looks amazing. So, yes, Sally, you are saying that it is nice and hot in the UK. You're in the 30s, that is blistering hot. It's nice and cool in Johannesburg at the moment. A lot warmer than last week, thankfully. I swear we could have, excuse me, we could have walked the streets of Johannesburg last week and photographed polar bears in the city. It was freezing cold. And Peter, good evening from South Africa. And it sounds like the Netherlands is also very, very hot, 30 degrees here. Well, good luck with that heat. I prefer the cooler weather because you can dress to the occasion. But without further ado, hello, Anne. Thank you so much for joining. I see a lot of people are still tuning in, but the clock has hit 7, and Andrew Beck is chatting about Namibia directly after this webinar, so I cannot stretch over the 45 minutes too long, so I need to get going. And if people join a bit later, this is okay. They can catch up on the session on YouTube. But for those of you who have just joined, welcome to this evening's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And please feel free to leave any questions you may have during the session in the Q&A tab, and I will get back to those questions at the end of the presentation that I've put together for all of you. And please, asking me questions makes my life and my job a little easier, so don't feel bad if you want to leave a question. Please feel free to leave any questions you may have. So I'm going to jump into sharing a screen quickly, and I'm just going to close that up, play this movie. There we go. Okay, so this evening we are here to chat about, just want to move that down, how to keep your photography skills sharp while in lockdown and while we cannot travel. And as I'd mentioned right in the introduction of this evening's webinar, I do hope that after this small presentation that all of you feel inspired to not only pull that camera back out to the cupboards, wipe the dust off and keep shooting, but try to shoot something different and something new, because in my opinion this is the best way to learn. So let's move on to this first slide, and my picture is going to go blank right now because I want you to focus on this.
think that's the effect.
So there you have it. I know a lot of you will find this to be your photographic happy place, out in the wilds of Africa and just taking in and photographing the beautiful surroundings and the animals that call these incredible vistas home. So this is our happy place, for me at least. I am happiest out in the middle of the wilds of Africa, and unfortunately we cannot get there. So what now? How will I keep my photographic skills sharp, intact, and in tune for that day when it comes, we can travel again, which hopefully is sooner rather than later? How can I get this done? Well, to put it in a shorter term, put in the time. This is the most important thing to remember, because the more you shoot, the more you're going to learn. The more you shoot, the more you're going to remember. And the more you shoot, the better that muscle memory will grow when it comes to what trigger does what button does what, where do certain buttons sit on the camera, is a crucial part when it comes to not only keeping your photographic skills sharp, but also to improve your photographic skills. So shoot anything and everything, whatever it may be, even if it's images you do not want to keep in the future. If you have a stray cat that runs through your yard at 2 p.m. every day, be ready for it, wait for it, and try and capture that action as he chases a bird through the yard, or whatever it may be. In my case, I'm very lucky. My dog loves chasing a ball. So get a family member or a friend, or you can even just throw the ball yourself and photograph him running back if you do have a dog that enjoys chasing a ball. Sally, I know your dog loves water. Photograph your dog going absolutely mad, jumping around in the water. It is great practice. This crazy mutt, Gunther, is also a pro dove hunter. He loves stalking pigeons and doves. And if your dog's one of the crazy nuts as mine is, get down on your belly, lay down low, and photograph the stalking action. Capture moods and emotions, because not only are you going to learn photographically how to set up a camera, how to take the shot, and how to achieve good results, but you will also learn a little bit about animal behavior. Because when dogs stalk, or when cats stalk, whatever pet you have back home, a lot of their behavioral traits will be similar to those of the animals that you will find out or find in the wilds of Africa. So shoot your pets. It's the easiest and cheapest way to practice your photography. If you can, and if you're lucky enough, and you've got bird sanctuaries nearby, or you've got outdoor parks where you can go and walk or sit. This particular shot was taken just outside of the town I grew up in, a town called Nigel, at a bird sanctuary called Marivale. And we had sat, myself and a friend of mine sat here for about 4 hours only photographing these two birds, because it wasn't the most prolific morning. These were the only two birds around. And this is what we shot. For 4 hours, we photographed this. And they were doing different things. Mom and baby sitting next to each other, mom feeding baby, mom abandoning baby, baby sitting alone. So not only do you learn a lot about a particular species behavior, but if you're willing to put in the time, and this is proof of putting in the time always pays off. Because only in about the last hour or so of sitting with these birds did we witness this mom coming in frequently feeding the chick. And it was an incredible morning, an incredible moment, and well worth waiting there for 4 hours just for this. So putting in the time, I cannot stress it enough, is crucial. So if you're sitting at home saying, I don't have pets, can't photograph those. There's no parks nearby to photograph birds, I can't do that. You might be sitting like this now, okay, thinking, what can I do? That brain's ticking over, trying to think, and then you come up with a great idea. Sneaky photographs of the neighbors. that's not the best idea. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You might get into trouble doing this. So in this evening's webinar, from this point onwards, I want to share some ideas with all of you that I had got up to during our strict lockdown regulations in South Africa for the first 5 to 6, actually 7 weeks. It's been quite strict. We couldn't really move, we couldn't really get out. And so I'm going to try and encourage all of you this evening to try and get creative. So push that technical half of your brain aside, thinking about when can we travel again? Where can I travel to first? What park should I visit? What's the nearest park to me? How can I get a sneaky shot of the neighbor? Something like that. Leave that aside and start working with the other half of your brain, which is the creative side. And I hope that after tonight's session, some of you might have seen some of the work I'm going to show to you tonight in blogs that I've written, on Instagram, wherever it may be. But I just decided to put this all into one place this evening, that in the hopes that this will get your creative juices flowing. And please feel free, when you are busy with any of the following back home, feel free to send me an email or a WhatsApp message or an Instagram message, and I will get back to you with any ideas, any techniques, and how you can improve the shot. So basically what I had done during this lockdown session is I ventured down the creative photography genre. And it's something I've never delved into. So it was quite a challenge. And in all honesty, it got the senses going, because you're moving into the unknown. You're not too sure what to do and how to do it. But in all honesty, this is the best way to learn. Moving outside of your comfort zone forces you to get comfortable with what you are now facing. And so I decided to gather a few common things you can find around the house. So in this image, you can see everything's lying on top of a black, this was a bed sheet. So if you just have a big black piece of material or a big black towel that you can hang behind your subjects, you can use this. Obviously I had my camera at hand and I shot with my 24-70. I had some additional light sources in terms of a headlamp and a few little standing flashlights. I had lighter fluid and a lighter. And then just below that, you will see there's a reflective black thing. And this was literally a picture frame, a glass out of a picture frame that I had painted black on the one side. When I flipped it over, I had a nice gloss black reflection. I had some fairy lights, newspapers, and throughout the sequence of the next images, you're going to see a few things that are going to pop into these scenes that you do not see in here. But everything I used to shoot the scenes that you're going to see coming up were things that I found in and around the house. Okay, moving on to this first image. So as you can see, quite simple, a nice big, I think this was it's a special kind of wine glass that I have. And I filled this up with water just beneath halfway. And you will see how I got that background so pitch black. These were the settings I used for this scene. And because I was dropping this lemon from a height and the water was going to spray out, I wanted to make sure that my shutter speed was fast enough. But the important thing here is with those additional light sources I had in place to illuminate this glass and the lemon falling into it, I had ample light reflecting off and out of the glass. And I took my exposure compensation all the way down to -5. So a lot of the time on your camera, you will only see it move to -3, but you can go beyond -3 full stops to a maximum of either -5 or +5. And all of these scenes and shots that you are going to see coming up now were shot in Aperture Priority. So basically what I had done here is I was lucky that because I spent the first couple of weeks of lockdown at my mother's house, she was my trigger to release the lemon. So if you do have a family member or a friend, or if your dog is extremely well trained and you can tell him to drop the lemon right now, you can then achieve a shot like this. These images are also possible by setting up a tripod with your camera in a steady position, and you can set your trigger to a shutter delay, so a 10-second delay, and you can just count down with your camera, time it, and drop the lemon at the right time. And it took multiple shots and multiple tries, but eventually I got the results I was looking for. And it is a lot of fun. With this newspaper shot, you will see a lot of the scenes were very similar in terms of the EV, the exposure compensation, a lot of them down into the negative, because I wanted to keep the background nice and dark to achieve a result where my viewer's eyes will go to the main feature of the scene, which in this case, it is a newspaper burning in my hands. And again, you can set this up, camera on a tripod, 10-second delay, light your newspaper, and then just stand in place, and hopefully the trigger goes off at the right time. If you do have a model that you can use a friend or a family member, ask them to hold this newspaper, and you shoot away. This one, I am going to warn you, newspaper burns extremely quickly, so just make sure you are in a safe place. Make sure you've got a nice big bucket of water just in case something goes wrong, because as I mentioned, that piece of paper burns rapidly. I'd also recommend trying to do this on a night or an evening, afternoon, where the winds aren't too strong. We don't want you to go burning your house down. This is another newspaper shot that I'd lit on the end. So you can just choose a desired background or scene that is going to be blurred out in the back. And literally what I had done is I took my camera and I wrapped this newspaper around the diameter of my lens to make sure that it's perfectly cylindrical. And I stapled each end, so I had a perfect tunnel, and literally took a shot through that newspaper as it started burning. And you will notice that my aperture was slightly higher at about f8, because I wanted to have a little bit of this tunnel and that newspaper in focus so that I can see those words that then are clear at the edge of the newspaper and then finally fade out to a blurred, unclear scene around the edges. But a lot of fun, this one. But again, very important to try and do this where the wind is not too crazy and in a safe area where you do not risk burning your house down. Outdoors is definitely recommended for this. Do not try shooting that indoors. This popcorn scene was a lot of fun. And obviously you can not only, I see someone's question that had come in, I will get back to that as soon as we're done. But this was quite a fun scene. And again, similar setup to that wine glass and the lemon falling into it. I had set up this popcorn box on the ground, which was the black sheet that lay on the ground and up onto two chairs behind it. And if you look at that -5 exposure compensation, this is why I was able to black out that background so well. Is because I had a black bed sheet, artificial light just falling on the popcorn and the popcorn box, and with a -5 exposure compensation or exposure value, I could black out that background entirely. And again, here you can set up on a tripod, and with a 10-second timer delay, you can time, as soon as that trigger's about to shoot, you can drop the popcorn manually yourself, or if you do have someone who can assist you and you can count them down, 3, 2, 1, and as they drop, you continually fire, you can then create something cool. And again, this shot took multiple tries to achieve. And so if you're not getting it on the first try, don't say, okay, this is not for me, I'm not going to do it. It took me multiple times, like even this shot, this was probably one of the most challenging, just to line it up properly. It was such a challenge. But if you don't put in the time, you're never going to reap the reward. So remember that. Put in the time. Even if you're failing, if you do not persevere, you will never achieve. So just keep trying. And fortunately, my mom is pretty much an incredible hoarder. And I think I have inherited this, unfortunately. I hate getting rid of things. But I found this old music book that my mom had kept from years ago. And it just set up a perfect scene where I took one of my acoustic guitars, put it down on the lawn on that black sheet with a black sheet behind it, and with the natural sunlight falling onto this page that I had folded and stapled closed at the edges, this provided enough light to give me, or to show off the music notes. Obviously enough light falling on the guitar, and with the negative exposure, I was able to capture a really cool, moody, muso type of image, but quite challenging to try and keep that shape, that water droplet shape, steady with a camera in hand and still shoot that scene. It was quite tough. You will notice my shutter speed was very slow, a 40th of a second. But remember, I was shooting with a 24-70mm lens at 24 millimeters, and to eliminate any kind of camera shake, your shutter speed should be at least 1 over whatever focal length you were using. And because I was sitting at 25, that shutter speed was fast enough to eliminate me shaking a little bit as I was photographing. So just try and remember this as well. This was a really fun scene. So I don't know if any of you are Sweetie fans. I love candy. So this is a mixture of M&Ms and Astros. Astro is probably the best candy in the world. I think there'll be a lot of people who want to argue and negotiate that, but maybe we can set up a webinar to discuss those, but Astros are awesome. But what I had done here is, because M&M's obviously had a beautiful little M on it as their little marketing tool, it allowed me to set up the scene in a pretty cool way to show off what these pieces of candy were. So I placed a few pieces of candy in this glass jar, placed 2 M's facing my way purposely, and then I lay this little piece of, or this candy in this jar on a small piece of white paper, and I lined up my backdrop also as a white piece of paper with good light, as you can see, falling on this, but this is natural light coming through a window. It was a lot of natural light. And again, similar to that popcorn scene, you just want to drop the sweets down and keep photographing. So if you have someone who can drop those sweets for you, this would probably be the easiest. But if you can set your camera up onto a tripod, you can then try and time it yourself if you've got no one to drop the sweets for you. And you will notice here, my exposure compensation was on 0. The reason being is because it's such a white surrounding and background area, there was no need for me to go underexposed. I wanted to keep it at neutral. I could have possibly gone a bit over to get rid of a bit more shadows, but to me, this worked quite well. You will also notice in this scene that my shutter speed was only 200th of a second. And that's why you can see a lot of the sweets that have formed this arc as they're falling are slightly blurred out. And this is because my shutter speed was just a little bit slow. Gravity was pulling those pieces of candy down to the earth a lot quicker for a 200th of a second to capture nice and pin sharp. But in my opinion, the slower shutter speed had worked better for the scene, because it's actually giving you, now looking at the scene, the impression of, okay, these sweets are falling because they are blurred. There's motion, particularly that red one on the far left. There's a lot of motion in that piece of candy. So it's just adding a bit more value and telling the viewer a little bit more about what is happening to this arc of candy. They're all falling down to the ground. Then looking at this, you can get into some scenes which require a little bit more, if I may call it, elbow juice, and put in a bit more work to set up. And here, as you will see, I had to build a wooden structure and measure out the height of where I want this fish line. I see someone's chat that came in, but we'll get to that after this. But you'll see I lined up 2 strands of fish line across these planks. And so literally I had to go and measure every single, or the height of every single nail that I wanted to hit in, so that it could all lie equally and in line. So this took a little while, if anything, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes to put together, to build the wooden structure. So it had a wooden base, 2 wooden sides, hit the nails in, and then spin the fishing line between these nails to line the food and this disassembled sandwich up onto this fishing line. And what I had done here is I set my camera up on, I didn't have my tripod at my mom's house during the time of lockdown. So I photographed this in her salon, and I used one of her little side tables, and I'd literally just stacked books on top of each other, put my camera down steady on these books, found my focus, and on a 10-second shutter delay, I hit the trigger, I ran around the camera and went and stood behind the scene and took the shot. But as you will see, there's a lot of pieces of gut and fishing line running across the scene. But if you are willing to spend time in post-processing and understand how the clone and heal tool works, you can go and achieve some pretty cool looking results. So you will see in this scene, you cannot see that fishing line anymore. Just because I had spent, this took a long time though, to go and get rid of every single one of those pieces of fishing line. But in my opinion, I think it worked out really, really well. And because it's quite a static subject, that shutter speed of 0.002 of a second was a little bit dramatic because nothing was really moving. It could have been a lot slower than that. But at the time, I was just so excited to get the shot done. But just for your reference, you can use a slower shutter speed than I had used here, and in turn probably also dropped the ISO slightly as well. But most importantly here, you will see that I was sitting at f2.8, and the reason for this is because I only wanted my deconstructed sandwich that is now apparently floating in the air. I only wanted that to be in focus. So I pre-focused on, I think it was the cheese that I focused on, and therefore that whole row of food will then be in the range of focus. And because of that shallow depth of field at 2.8, with me standing about 1 meter behind the food, standing like that, I am pretty much blurred out. You can see who it is and what I'm doing, but it's not crisp and sharp. Your viewer's eyes are only going to sit on the deconstructed sandwich. And then this was quite a fun one. So this is obviously where that black piece of glass that I had painted, that picture frame glass that I painted, came into great use. It's because I wanted a reflective black base, and you'll see behind that is the black bed sheet hanging behind this, and I've got my artificial light coming in from either side, and this reflective black piece of glass now is obviously allowing for some beautiful reflections. So I put this in just so that you could see how I set up the scene. And what I had done is I'd literally poured this flammable fluid over the block of ice, lit it with a lighter, and obviously the flame started running uncontrollably, which is really cool because, and this was the settings I'd used for the scene, and again, -5 underexposed all the way to 5 full stops under, so that only the ice, the fire above it, and the reflective light would render in the image, and everything else that's black and dark around it would have been blacked out, as you would see in these images. So this is a really fun shoot because you can literally just spend hours and hours and hours shooting. So I was literally sitting next to this table with my camera in hand. I'd lit the fire or the fluid, lay down and took continuous shots because the flames, as I mentioned, just run uncontrollably. You don't have control over where the flame's going and what it's doing. So you will see that you can, to me, this kind of looks like a phoenix or some kind of raptor or bird. It's a really cool looking image. And again, looking at that, a totally different look and feel to the image just because the flame decided to do something totally different a few seconds later after taking the previous shot. So it's really fun, this one. And I had done this indoors in a controlled space. Also very important to keep a like emergency extinguisher nearby, maybe if you're doing this indoors in a form of a towel, because you're obviously not going to go make a massive bonfire in the middle of your house. This should just be a small flame above the piece of ice. So don't go and build like a massive wooden fire to achieve this. You only need a little bit of flammable fluid and you can achieve it. So my extinguisher was just a old towel for if the fire started running, because as the ice melts, the flammable fluid obviously follows the water that's melting. So I would just douse the fire with this towel, close it up, kill all the oxygen, and therefore the flame would die. So if you do want to try this one, give it a go. It's a lot of fun because the opportunities and the results that come from them are endless. It is just absolutely incredible seeing what you can create with a piece of fire and a piece of ice. Two total opposite ends of a spectrum that work in harmony together when it comes to your photography. But please just be careful and do not burn your house down. This won't be good. But this is a really fun one. And I think out of everything I tried, this was probably the easiest one to achieve. What took me the most time was waiting for the paint to dry on that piece of glass that I had painted. This is a really fun one to go try out. Now moving to, and speaking of ends of the spectrum, probably one of the most challenging ones to achieve, spinning a tennis ball that had been dunked in water. And again, this could be set up on a tripod where you have a 10-second timer delay. And just before that timer goes, you can literally chuck that wet tennis ball up and spin it so that it results in this beautiful kind of atmospheric kind of look and feel to it. But the lighting here was really challenging. I mean, if you have proper flashes that you could set up, which I did not have, it probably would have been a lot easier. In my case, I had to make use of my vehicle's headlights to achieve the shot. But again, if you have a model doing this, because on a 10-second timer delay, you literally have one shot, so it might take longer and you might get quite wet because you're going to be spinning this ball and water is going to be hitting you in the face the whole time. So if you do have a model who can actually sit there and throw up and flick this ball, you as the photographer can then take multiple shots and hopefully create a appealing looking image a lot sooner. But all of these images are very possible even if you are alone and you've got no one helping you. But yes, out of all of them, this was probably the most challenging. So I would not, if you do not have flashes that you can set up and trigger at certain times, I would highly recommend you try and give this one a go after you've tried easier ones, because if you try this first, you're probably just going to give up and leave. But as I mentioned in the beginning, do not give up. If you do not persevere, if you do not put in the time, you will never, ever achieve good results. So I hope this comes to mind when you give this a try. And then now that darkness has fallen, you can start something extremely creative that is commonly referred to as light painting. So in that image that I showed all of you as to what some of the common household things I'd used to create these images, the fairy lights were on the bottom left. And these images that are going to pop up now were all achieved by making use of the fairy light. And this bunch of fairy lights that I'd used wasn't a very long one. If you do have long fairy lights, just fold them in half and in half again to make a shorter piece. So this piece of fairy lights, yes, if I think back, was probably just under a meter long. And in this scene, what I had done is I'd literally just spun the fairy lights around and around and around and around and around. And you will notice that my settings were very different here. I was shooting on full manual mode, so I came off of Aperture. And as mentioned, this is only possible after darkness has fallen. The room you are in has to be extremely black, very dark, with no stray lights coming through the windows or wherever it may be. Because if there is stray light coming through, it's going to alter the effect and the look of the image. So as you will see here, I was on full manual. My ISO was very low, only at 100. My aperture was at f10, and this isn't to get more or less in focus. For the purpose of this scene, it was at f10 just to help me manage my exposure so that it didn't come out too light or too dark. Because I was sitting at I manually selected a full 10-second exposure so that as soon as I hit that trigger on a 10-second shutter delay, the best would be to have your camera on a tripod. I again had it on a stack of books because I didn't have a tripod with me. But as I hit that trigger, only 10 seconds later, because it was on a trigger delay, only 10 seconds later will the shutter release. So I ran into place, picked up the fairy light and started swinging it in a circular motion, trying to keep my hand and wrist as steady as possible. So I didn't swing it like this and go ovals and then circles. I tried to keep it as neat as possible. And for 10 seconds, I did this because my shutter was going to be open for 10 seconds. So probably some of the easier light painting techniques to use is just to swing something randomly, but you can also venture off into trying something a little bit different. Look for a nice, cool, moody, abstract kind of subject that you can put in the foreground. And for the scene, what I had done is I took those same fairy lights and I put them in a glass jar that had a nice wooden rope on it, which I attached a string to. And again, with a, let me just go back there. Sorry about that. I thought I'd put the settings in, but they were identical to these. On full manual, a low ISO of 100, around f10, and a shutter speed of also about 10 to 15 seconds. And all I had done is with these lights in the jar, I'd hit that shutter, and only 10 seconds later did that shutter activate. And I was standing behind this wooden ball of roots, which is a piece of table decoration. And I literally just went up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down behind this ball. And this is what's created those cool looking streaks. I didn't do it much because it was open for 15 seconds. If I had done that for the full 15 seconds, I just would have had a white wall, similar to the one that's going to come up next. But what I had done is I literally just went back and forth about 3 or 4 times. And then I lifted the lights just above this subject, this ball of roots. And I just literally held it there for the remainder of the time so that enough light would then fall down, reflect off my subject and into my camera. And I then rendered a result like you see over here, which is really cool. And then what I did over here, the exact same settings, ISO of 100, f10, shutter speed of about 10 to 15 seconds. And with those fairy lights, what I had done is during that whole duration where my shutter was open all the time, I just swung those fairy lights in a circular motion behind my subject continuously for the full duration. And that's why I've just got a full white and very dense white streaky background. But I think it came out looking pretty cool. And then there is another light painting technique that I then tried and discovered, and this one worked extremely well. So all you need, and you will see here, I used my reflective black base, which was that piece of frame that I had painted, a light bulb, and I took a little bit of my mom's, because she's a hairdresser, she's got that hair, not hairspray, but it's a little bottle that sprays water onto your hair. Yeah, clearly I'm not a hairdresser, I don't know what that is. It's just a spray bottle. That's what it is. It's a spray bottle. And I sprayed a bit of that on the bulb, on the glass. And then what I had done is I went and downloaded this. I literally just went onto Google, typed in color spectrum, went onto images on my phone, and I downloaded this picture. And what I had done is set up my camera, as I mentioned previously, would be best on a tripod. I didn't have mine, so I put mine on a stack of books. The bulb standing static on the table, and then ISO of about 200. Again, this is in full manual. ISO of 200, aperture of f18, and then a full 15, as I said there, seconds, full 15 seconds. And literally what I had done with this color spectrum is I just, as that trigger released and fired, I moved it past the back of the screen very slowly, and it created these beautiful streets as it went by. So I literally just went by once slowly like that, and the light had then painted itself into and onto my camera sensor automatically. And easy results and very cool looking results, if I have to say so myself. Once I achieved a few of those just plain streets going past, a few acceptable results, if I may, I tried something different with this. And what I had done is I literally just took this color spectrum and did little circular motions like this and went crazy behind it. And this obviously created these nice little kind of circular washed out color spectrums behind my light bulb. And then lastly, what I have tried, you'll see there's streaks going left, streaks going up and down. What I had done here is I literally, same settings as you would have seen on the first light bulb image, is as soon as that trigger fired, I moved my phone up and down like this behind the light bulb. And once those up and down motions were completed, I moved it from side to side just a little bit. And this is then what created the up and down and left and right streaks within that image. I've written blogs about some of the work that you have just seen, and I would highly recommend, if you have not yet, go and check them out, because there may be some things that I'd explained in a little bit more depth. Maybe in the blog you will understand a bit more of the techniques a bit better. And the easiest way to go and find them is when you go onto the Wild Eye page or website, go click on the word blog, which is second to the right. And once you've selected this and the blog page loads up, just scroll down past the first 6. I think it's the first 6 will be the latest published blogs. And just below that, you will get our categories. And once you see the our categories grid pop up, just go select photographic tips on the top right. And then once you select those, you will see a number of photographic tip blogs pop up. And some of them will be my most recent, being the photographic tips and how you can improve your photography skills. And especially these are all kind of modeled around this time of lockdown where we can't move and you're kind of forced to photograph either in your own yard or in your own home or in a park nearby. So I would highly recommend that you go and try and find some time, read these blogs, and hopefully learn a little bit more through reading them as well. So this one is Move Out of Your Comfort Zone. Also a great blog to go and read. A lot of this speaks of the creative photography that we just looked at, but quite a fun read, and I'm sure you'll draw a lot of inspiration out of it. And then Bird Photography Tips is quite a technical one. It's, I think, my most recent photographic tip blog. And this is, as I mentioned, a technical one, but one I think you can learn a lot from, particularly for those of you who can get out to bird parks or bird gardens or sanctuaries or whatever it may be. This will be a great blog for you to read the night before you embark on an adventure to go photograph some birds. So please do let me know if these blogs help. Let me know if this webinar had helped. And as I mentioned, if you put any of these to the test, let me know if you have questions, and I will gladly assist you and answer any questions you may have. And I'm going to then leave you with this. I truly do hope you feel inspired after this. Putting this webinar together, I was so excited because I was just reliving all of these photographic adventures I went on in the comfort of my mother's house, should I say, not my home. And as I'd mentioned previously, things do get a little bit frustrating because it's quite challenging at times, but it is a world of fun. And if you achieve good, adequate results, it is, I can't explain that pleasure. It is so, 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 so much fun. So I'm going to stop sharing right now because that is it for this evening's webinar. I do see there is a question in the chat, and Sally Anthony had asked, were these all shot with a 2470? Yes, Sally, these were all shot with my 24-70. So I would even recommend, if you have a wider lens, 16-35 or a fixed 20mm, whatever it may be, this will do the trick just as well. But for all of the shots you would have seen there was in a range between 24 and 70 millimeters. I do also see 3 chats came in during our talk over here. Barbara Hartman, the guitar shot is genius, amazing and epic. Thank you for your kind words, Barbara. I really do appreciate it. And Amy, creative, artistic, I'd love to see some of the work. Trial and error photos during your process. Okay, I haven't deleted a lot of them yet, so if I find the time, Amy, I can definitely show you a lot of the disasters I created, because there's quite a few. And then Sally just says, thanks. It's very needed at this moment. You're most welcome, everybody. And I see one more question that popped in there. Daruti, what kind of setup would you recommend for smoke photography, black background, artificial light support, etc.? So I think if you, like referring to that smoke photography, is that very colorful smoke and that big cloudy puffy stuff? Any recommendations there? I would have to say, I've never tried it myself, but I would say probably outdoors would be best on a good, a well-lit day, but not extremely harsh and bright light, probably more dampened, overcast kind of light where the light is soft and you can render rich colors. I would recommend that. But yes, I think, remember, when you do underexpose your scene, if there's not a lot of light around, you are going to preserve colors and withhold and draw a lot of good colors. Whereas if you start overexposing these scenes, you're going to lose out your colors. Your camera is going to burn out colors. So I don't think artificial light source or support would be needed if you're shooting outdoors on a well-lit day. It just depends on how much smoke there is. But if it's those massive smoke bombs that throw massive thick clouds of smoke, I think you'll realize very quickly that the shooting will be quite easy in terms of the setup of your camera. But if you want to venture down that lane, we don't have too much time to discuss that right now. But if you want to venture down that lane, Daruti and Randeep, let's set up a Zoom call. We can chat about it, and you can tell me exactly what you're trying to achieve here, because I'm not too sure what you mean by smoke photography. So let's set up a chat, and I can answer your questions there. Thank you for the question, though. And thank you so much for everyone who had joined. I hope it was worth your while. And it was so great seeing all of you again. I took a bit of a webinar break last week, but I'm back at it with this evening's webinar. And if you have not yet, I've also got a webinar coming up next week where I'm chatting about the start to end process of low-key moody images, which is going to be quite a fun one. This is a premium Wild Eye webinar where I'll be sharing in-depth information as to how to create these kind of images. But thank you all so very much, and I thank you for your kind words. It was great having you all on board this evening. I hope you have a great day further, evening, depending on what the time is back home. And I do hope that you have one incredible weekend. You guys deserve it. Have a great evening, and chat to you all soon. Bye-bye.